We need to set some things in motion, and the two-party system is not a fan, obviously. They're going to work very hard to protect the power that they have.
Welcome to UnityNow, the podcast where we discuss unity in the face of division. Inspired by the Unity 2020 plan, we strive to unite Americans by highlighting the middle ground between the two dominant parties and promoting the individual over groups. Each episode, we will bring you exciting, well-informed guests and host nuanced conversations about politically charged subjects. Our goal is to bring an end to the ideological war threatening the collective well-being of this great country.
Welcome back to the UnityNow podcast. My guest on this episode is Blair Walshingham. Blair is an Air Force veteran, mother, homesteader, and concerned citizen. In 2020, Blair ran for Tennessee's 1st Congressional District. Although she didn't win the race, her experience proved to her that something needed to change. Now she is the Deputy Political Director for the new Forward Party. The Forward Party was formed just a few months ago and is looking to position itself as not just another alternate party. We talk about her background and her experience in 2020, why the Forward Party is necessary, and what makes it unique. We also talk about what success will look like, what the challenges are, and ways they plan to overcome them. Hi, Blair. Welcome to the UnityNow podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Toby. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we appreciate your time so much. We know you're a very, very busy person, and I'm sure you'll tell us a little bit about that here in a second. And we want to hear about, of course, the Forward Party, which we're here to talk about, but we also want to hear about your journey up until this point. So if you could give us a sense of kind of your path to being part of the Forward Party now.
Wow, yeah, absolutely. So I have had an interesting journey to politics. I grew up in a very right-leaning household, private Catholic school, in a military family, so I've been all over the country, and I would say I've seen a lot of different struggles and a lot of different solutions. Ultimately, I actually joined the Air Force at the age of 17, and that took me on an even bigger journey across the country, meeting more diverse people, and I think that played a really big role in actually where I ended up today. So I've had a variety of jobs over the years, from project management to working in automotive to being a cook. It's just an average person's life. And through an average person's life, I've experienced struggles. And I can really relate to the general population, and I know that this system is broken. And the way that things have been functioning aren't helping. They are this constant back and forth mess that's not leading us where we need to be. So ultimately, I didn't think that there was a lot of politicians out there who weren't corrupt. They did not inspire me. I didn't think they would bring about those changes. There were a few, but it was very, very minimal until I actually heard Andrew. And what's interesting, I'm not even sure I've told Andrew this story, but he was talking about universal basic income, and I heard the idea and I hated it. I was like, this is awful. This is the worst. It's terrible. So I started doing all this research, met with economists, read all these books, and was like, wow, this is actually an incredible idea. And he has like 300 other policies. They're all very data-centric, solution-oriented, very down-to-earth, very real. So I came to be a volunteer for his presidential campaign, and that was here in Tennessee. I live in the 1st District, top right corner, middle of nowhere, very rural, very red district. And when he hung up his hat for the presidential run, I stepped up to run for U.S. House for Congress. And I did go on to be the nominee here, although I did not win this race, and I didn't expect to. We're 141 years consecutive Republican elected officials. So that was an uphill battle in its own. We did phenomenal. I'm happy to talk about that more if you'd like, but that's essentially what led me to Forward Party. Is going through that process, seeing the behind the scenes of it all, and realizing how truly broken it is, even for the good guys. If they can get through all these barriers, there's not a lot that they can do. So I wanted to be part of that change, part of that solution to keep things actually improving in this country.
Okay, fascinating. Yeah, we of course at the podcast like to highlight the individuals over groups. So we definitely want to hear a little bit more about your individual journey. So one point that stuck out to me was growing up in a right-leaning area and right-leaning household, but I believe you ran as a Democrat, right, in the run for Congress. Tell us about what took place with that shift.
Yeah, it's really interesting even to me, because you would think naturally I would probably progress into a Republican-leaning political view, and I really didn't. And to be completely honest, if I was being completely honest with myself, I didn't necessarily fit into the Democratic ticket either. And I actually went through those struggles during my campaign. I was somewhere in the middle. It was truly mixed views. And like I said, I would really contribute that to a wide variety of people and experiences in my life. I was not kept in one particular bubble or another. So there's a lot of preconceived notions people have that I didn't. And I'm really open to new ideas and looking at the research and being like, maybe I was wrong about that. And taking those facts in stride. And a lot of people have a hard time with that. But yeah, so running here was interesting and difficult, but it was a lot of fun. The best way that you can figure out what is actually going on in your community is going out and talking to people. And ultimately, that's what I did. And it was incredibly difficult because this was in the early stages of COVID-19. And a lot of places didn't want you to door knock or go canvassing or do any in-person events. We did a lot of this being on the computer. Eventually, we were able to do more community outreach, and that is what I focused on my campaign during that time, was making sure people were doing okay. The people who did lose their jobs or couldn't leave their house because of COVID, we took a large portion of campaign funds. We were able to fund some local groups in community aid, buy people groceries. I did a small but very successful UBI trial for the first time ever here in East Tennessee. So I did everything I could to truly help people in the moment. And if more representatives would do that, it would be entirely different. There's billions of dollars that go into campaigns competing against each other. And if they took that funds and went out to their communities and started fixing things, the world would be just immensely different. So I try to lead by example, and that was the core focus at that time. It's interesting here in East Tennessee too. We don't have ranked choice voting or any type of star ranked system here. It's just your traditional first past the post. You have to be a registered Democrat or Republican to vote in the primary. And since this is a heavy right leaning district, even people who don't identify on the right still register for the primaries so that they can help lean and decide who the Republican nominee is going to be, because ultimately that will likely be their rep. So for them, it's often the lesser candidate of evils in their eyes, and that's just wrong. So for example, we had, I actually think it was more, but ultimately, and then we had like 19 Republican candidates vying for the seat, 3 Democrats, including myself, 1 independent, and a few write-ins. And even at the debate stage, I wasn't even invited to some debates, even after I won the primary. And there was one, it was all Republicans. I did go. They didn't even let me be in the photo. They were like, no, not you. Only the Republicans, not you. You stand over there. So even as the Democratic nominee here, it wasn't fair. And if you're an independent or other party candidate, that treatment is tenfold. And we can definitely talk about that more, but it's a huge problem, obviously. Very, very one-sided system.
So it sounds like it. Sounds like Tulsi's experience trying to being the Democratic nominee for the president. But I want to go back real quick if we can. I'm just curious. I did hear about your trial on UBI that you did personally. I think it was it 2 households, I think you said?
It ended up being 2 households, $12,000 over a year.
Okay. And I can tell you my right-leaning Republican echo chamber here in Indianapolis, where I voted for Trump in 2016, which I've talked about on this podcast plenty of times, and eventually found my way out of. Eventually, I heard about UBI, and I said I had the same reaction, like, well, no way, right? Because people need to pull them up from the bootstraps and all that crap, right? But tell us about why why it worked with those families.
Yeah, it's amazing. I do come from that hardworking mentality. I also come from a taxes of theft background. I felt pretty strongly about that at one point, and that's why I know people can change. But with UBI specifically, like I said, I did a lot of research, but it's ultimately different if you experience it. When you see people's reaction, you see pain literally lift off of them because they're able to do something different with their life. They're able to walk away from a bad situation or a bad job that they are working hard at, or they're able to help their child beyond what they couldn't due to whatever circumstances they may be facing. That is a powerful feeling. And ultimately, as human beings on this planet, we should be really considering what are we going to allow to be the norm? Are we really going to allow people to go hungry and to freeze to death sleeping in the street while we throw trillions and billions of dollars around to fight about issues? So I saw that cash, especially here. We have a lot of really, really poor districts. People are in immense poverty traps. A lot of the times it's multi-generational. So a lot of these children are born into a lack of resources. Their parents may not have an education. They may not have a good job. They may not even have a car. They might live 30 minutes or an hour from civilization. And it's easy to say, well, move. Well, how are they going to move? Where are they getting the money? How are they getting to this new job to get the money to move? Many of them haven't seen something different. They don't know that there's other possibilities out there. But when you're down that far deep into just being stuck, and we know, looking at data, that actually affects your IQ, right? It's really hard to plan long-term and think about bigger goals when you're struggling to keep a roof over your head or to feed your family, these just like basic survival needs. So UBI would actually help people really do better. And the data definitely shows that, and I saw it here also. From a mental health standpoint to starting their own businesses, one of our recipients actually started a pottery business. It's like really amazing. She had tried to start it, but she never could save enough to like really get it going, and she was able to do that. It's just phenomenal. There was a tornado that came through during my campaign, and my other recipient was able to help his mom repair her house after the tornado damage when her insurance wouldn't cover it. You know, nobody would help, and she's got a wall missing. These are the types of things you can't plan for. You can't plan for everything in life. You can't just pull yourself out. We are a social species. We have to work together. We have to help one another. And I think we should really raise the bar of what's acceptable. And cash helps people do that, regardless of what struggle they're facing.
Yeah. So in your experience, those two families, I mean, what are the Republican Party lines, right? They would use it for alcohol and drugs or stuff like that, right? So
Yep.
I assume they didn't do that, right?
Thank you for tuning into the UnityNow podcast. We are a 100% volunteer organization dedicated to highlighting the sane middle ground between the two dominant parties and focusing on the individual over groups. If you've enjoyed this program, please consider supporting us through our Patreon. Links to our support page, as well as merchandise and full episodes, can be found at our website at unitynowpodcast.com. Now, back to our show.
No, absolutely not. I hear that a lot. They're like, oh, well, you know, they'll buy a flat screen TV or a PlayStation. And I'm like, you know what? This is honestly America. Are we going to say that someone having a flat screen and a PlayStation is bad? No, we want people to have enjoyment. This is supposed to be the cornucopia, you know, of success. We want people to be thriving and happy and enjoyable. Too much sadness is already in this world. Let's move away from that. But yeah, there's a lot of misinformation out there, especially about this topic. And when we say UBI or universal basic income, they're not all the same, right? There's lots of different methods out there, ways to pay for it, and we can argue the specifics, you know, all day. But ultimately, it's easily done. It's actually a very simple solution that we could implement.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to ask about that was because, you know, you had experience with two families. You know, I heard about it. You know, I heard Andrew Yang on Joe Rogan's podcast, and that's when I started really listening about it and learned about it. So, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for that. So,
yeah, and if I may, Toby, real quick, there's another interesting factor, because you've got to think about, I'm in this R+31 super Republican district,
right,
and I ran heavily on universal basic income. So most people are like, oh, you can't do it. The right will never support it. And that's entirely untrue. Most people do realize the struggles, and they've seen damage in their community, whether it's from drugs or lack of education, lack of opportunity. They ultimately want to fix those things. They want their neighbors to do well. They want their kids to go to school with other kids that are thriving. And it really isn't that rare, right? I had a great turnout. We had some of the best records in this district, essentially ever, for a non-Republican even running on something like a universal basic income.
Wow.
Prospectively, we actually know that we had quite a bit of crossover in the election cycle. I can't credit myself completely for that because the Republican nominee ended up winning with less than 21% of the vote. So most of the people in this district did not want her to be their elected official, which is ultimately another problem.
Yeah.
And we could talk about ranked choice voting there too, but I'm just saying most people, regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, we agree that there's these real problems and that we want to make it better.
Yeah. How long again did you say that district had been red or Republican?
141 years now consecutively, almost 142.
Now, surely not, every year they weren't just trying to, vote for the not the evil person, right? So, but why do you think it was like that for so many years? Do they like the people that they're voting for, or eventually they're, just trying to vote for the less evil person?
If you ask people generally who are partisan, and that is majority of engaged voters, they're very partisan. They actually think the other team is like their mortal enemy. Every news source that they listen to is typically very one-sided. It's heavy on the division, little snippets that are intentionally made to gear your mind to go a certain way. So I would say there's not a lot of opportunity to be educated about what somebody else stands for, right? They just think, oh, this party's bad and their reps are going to support these other reps that I heard these bad things about and I don't like that. And they don't look any further. And to be fair, it's a lot of work to find out when your voting cycle is, who's running, doing all that research, make sure you're registered to vote, make sure they didn't purge your records. Like going through the process of even voting can be difficult for a lot of people if you're not hyper plugged in.
Right.
So it's just really interesting. There's just not a lot of overlap. And there's certainly good people on every side of the spectrum. I have met a lot of our local Republican legislator here on the state side, and there's a few of them that I would think they're really great people. They do try to help their communities out, and they're buying presents for families during the holidays who need it, and doing all these community events and passing some decent legislation. So it's definitely not this everybody in the duopoly is evil. It's that the system is actually broken, and a lot of people don't think a third-party candidate could even be successful, or an independent, or an oppositional just to what they've been taught and voted for, or their family taught them to vote for growing up.
Yeah, so how would have, if you had ranked choice voting with that election, how would have changed that election? Would you already have would you have won that if it was ranked choice, or tell us how that would have worked there?
I would like to believe so, but I don't know that would be true. It would be obviously improved because people would be more reflective of their true choice. And we had some interesting candidates, even on the Republican ticket, who didn't belong there. They actually identified as maybe libertarian or some other third party closer to the right, but they know that they're more likely to get the coverage and the outreach being on that party ticket. So if we had ranked choice voting, I think you would have seen a lot of people go for the candidate they actually prefer and then pick their backup. So like I had mentioned, a lot of Democrats vote Republican. They might not have to do that so much. They can actually pick their preferred candidate and pick their preferred Republican and vote more true to what they actually believe and support the person they think would make a good leader, and not about just viability or how many millions of dollars that they self-funded themselves, which ultimately is another barrier the media has. They'll tell you a candidate isn't viable unless they have millions of dollars. That's really about outreach. And guess what? You can do a lot of outreach for no dollars, to be honest. You just go out and you actually talk to people, you be involved in your community. So there's a lot of ways I would like to see changes. Ranked choice voting is certainly one of them. If we had a nonpartisan primary, that might have made an immense difference at the time too.
Yeah, just access to get on the ballot in the first place, right?
Yeah, and everybody on the same ticket, so you can vote for your preferred candidate instead of only one party or another. I think those two things paired together, having open, nonpartisan primaries with a rank style system, would just be an absolute game changer for the system that we have currently in America.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we come to, our podcast comes from Unity 2020 plan, right? From Brett Weinstein. And they were trying to draft the candidates, right? So we were trying to not be another party necessarily, because that's always a spoiler, right? So, So to the Forward Party, why another party? Why is this one going to work, basically?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get this one very often. You've got to think about how tense the previous election cycle was, and people are very nervous, right? About the division in this country, and they're going, oh my gosh, please don't help divide this country, which ultimately, if you can't pick your favorite candidate and you really want to vote for someone, you might end up in that position. Saying, well, I really want to vote for Blair, but I know this other person is more likely to win, and if I don't support them, then this other candidate I really don't like is going to have a better chance, right?
Yeah.
So we get this all the time, are you guys going to be a spoiler effect? And the answer is no, and we're incredibly different. There's been no party ever start up the way we're doing it. Most other parties are built on division, single issues that only a small percentage of the population actually care about. Ours is built on, it's just solidly focused on modernizing democracy and electing solution-oriented candidates who actually want to raise their hand and say, I want to be a part of this coalition, I want to move us in the right direction, and that's away from division. Majority of the people in this country, they support term limits. They want career politicians out of office, then they're going to work to end the corruption, and that's our focus. And we also are fully aware going into this that so many people would be disenfranchised from voting in a primary like we just discussed. So we get it. We say thank you for your support. This is great. You can get behind us and support Forward Party and still keep your party affiliation. We're not asking people to readily sign up for Forward Party. We're saying you can still be a supporter, you can still donate, you can still help bring all these changes and still vote for your candidate if you have a closed primary system or an open primary system even. Open primaries doesn't mean you can vote for whoever you want. You actually still have to, in many cases, register with one party and can only vote in that primary. So we're very unique and uniquely inclusive also.
Okay. So tell me about any early success you've now had with the Forward Party.
Oh, early is the right word. Let's see, it's the 16th. So we are just about 3 months old, and that includes obviously the holidays and Christmas and all the chaos. And we've had immense success. So we have thousands of volunteers in every single country across the states. We've raised over $1 million already. We're collaborating with orgs, groups, other parties. We have candidates not only seeking support and endorsement from Forward Party, but also elected officials who want to be part of the solution, again, where they're kind of sick of it too. If they're in a role where they can't actually make the changes because their party will turn their backs on them for listening to their people, that's not okay. And they don't want to be a part of that either in many cases.
Okay, so you said you had people that want to be candidates, but also current election officials, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Which is incredible. It's exciting. It feels great.
That's great. And, it's just the two of us here, right? You can tell me some names, right?
I can't give any names away. I wish I could, but we are going to roll out a slate of endorsements, hopefully sooner than later. And there's going to be some really amazing candidates that I'm thrilled about. I'm excited, and I feel very passionate to get behind. And we've set the bar pretty high, and we know, again, we're just laser focused on getting these solutions past the post, and they're going to help make that happen.
Okay. Fair enough. You don't have to give all your strategies out today necessarily. So we polled our audience on Twitter the last two times here, and we have a question here we got from the audience. So if you don't mind, I'll ask it.
Sure.
So what's the strategy to prevent the duopoly from punishing candidates in their party who also claim to be the 40 party?
That's a really interesting conversation.
Yeah.
The bigger question within that is, why would they do that? Why would they punish somebody for standing up for what they believe is right and punish people who elected this person? If you showed up to vote for this person and they're ultimately punishing you, that's telling the voters that your vote doesn't matter. that there isn't a true democracy in this country unless you're in one team or another that you can't represent and you cannot bring about these changes. That is actually the bigger question, is why are we going to allow that to happen in the first place? The real answer is we can be the change that makes that not happen. If you show up and you vote for these people, you donate to their campaigns, ultimately they're going to win, and they're going to win more and more, and they're going to have their own coalitions. And you'll hear Andrew talk about this a lot too, is ultimately a multi-party system would be best. That way you don't have just these two-stream factions. You have lots of different sections in the middle where you can have collaborative efforts and really compromise and come together on these solutions. We need to set some things in motion, and the two-party system is not a fan, obviously. They're going to work very hard to protect the power that they have. And you see this. Even down in Florida, you have Ron DeSantis, who has pushed legislation to make ranked choice voting outlawed. It's illegal. And to me, that's the smell of desperation. Why would you make it harder for people to vote for the candidate they truly believe in? And you're going to see a lot of that. So it's going to be up to us to have our candidates back and to really get out and show support for them, and make sure we continue to do that so that they can keep their seat and keep championing the ideas that we want them to.
So why did he pass that law, Ron DeSantis? Why did, did he pass it because he knows there's a challengers that will beat him if they did pass that law?
Yeah, absolutely. There's really no other reason to outlaw it. It's like I said, I think it really reeks of desperation and control, and that's absolutely everything that we don't want. That is one step closer to authoritarianism, is where our government is saying you can only vote for this or that, and that's your only options. You don't have a real say. That is false choice, right? So we want real choices. This is America, and we do believe in freedom and democracy, and we're not going to let something like this continue.
Yeah, I'm thinking, can candidates for the Forward Party, or like the Republican and Democratic parties, can they be a candidate for Forward Party if they only believe the same things, or can they be a Forward Party candidate if they only believe a few points? That like on your website, there's certain things, right, that the Forward Party is about, right? So, yeah. And you can go through those if you want. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Toby. So ultimately, our policy platform is fairly small at this point. And there's 6 pillars, which is like our basic beliefs. Things like grace and forgiveness. You're probably not going to see that in any other party. That's ultimately dealing with people in a respectful manner. Too many people in this country have forgotten how to have respectful conversations. You can disagree with someone without thinking they're your actual mortal enemy. So that's like a foundational. And then you have our actually policy page, which is ranked voting styles, ending gerrymandering, making sure that the maps are made with independent commissions so that we're not seeing these crazy districts where the representative is picking their people instead of the other way around. We have, again, it's a small policy page, but that's because we know that this is what majority of Americans agree on. This is what we know is going to be the foundation for a more fair and reflective democracy in this country, and we can come together on that common ground to make those changes. And I don't think that anybody should be discluded. Again, we're going to be supporting some of our own candidates, but we'll have candidates and elected officials from all over the political spectrum. We'll have Democrats, Republicans, and all in between, as long as they want our support, which we've seen a lot of, which is very exciting. So yeah, I don't think that that's a problem, and ultimately I can't wait for us to get past this point so that we can grow that platform.
So you're not necessarily concerned about already creating another team that must be joined, right, to support the party?
No, I think that our main goal in finding candidates, the litmus test, is about morals and a little less about policy. Obviously, there's a few key components we really need them to understand and support, like election reforms. If they're not in favor of making sure people can pick their candidates, then they're not going to be a forward party candidate. But like I said, I think it's incredibly inclusive, and most people actually agree on the things that we have on our platform. Arguably, the hardest one is actually UBI, because we get a lot of knee-jerk reactions like you and I actually had to it. And go, oh no, this is terrible, and then you have to really learn about it. So I would say that's arguably the hardest sell on there, but it really would take a lot of stress off of people. There's many people who don't show up to vote or don't care about elections. They don't have the bandwidth. Again, they're dealing with some really extreme situations, homelessness, poverty, natural disasters, and just having a little bit of collateral to free up your mind and get you into a better place leads to a more engaged society as a whole. And I think that would be really powerful too. Okay.
Fair enough. So I'll put you on the spot here. Tell us about maybe a couple of weaknesses about the Forward Party, and what's the plan to overcome them. If you can, I'll challenge you there.
That's a very important question, actually. I actually like to ask this when I used to do interviews for the hiring process. So I like this question. If you don't know what your weakest link is, then you really can't plan to improve. If you're just running around, you have no idea what you're doing wrong or where your weak point is, then you're not making true progress. That being said, I would say our weak point is the same as every other third party or alternative party, and that's access. That's media blackouts. That's not being able to get on a ballot line. It's signature deadlines. It's the duopoly, challenging every candidate and everything you do, holding you down in litigation. It's extremely time-consuming and costly. A lot of times they like to change the rules overnight. So there's a lot of barriers to third parties. I'd say that's ultimately the weakest one. And behind that, again, I would like to see our platform grow. But until we can make these changes, make these reforms, we can agree. We can agree on these solutions, but they're not getting passed. And that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. You see some in the 80 totals for certain policies, and they never come to the floor. They're never voted on. So our weaknesses is that we have barriers, and that's what we're working to bring those barriers down, not just for us, but for every other party that's out there. And then two, I would love to see our policy platforms expanded, and it's just a matter of time before we get there. And we're actually gonna have a convention, we're gonna have experts come and talk to you about policies and people from all over the spectrum, and let our supporters actually know about these things and actually have their voices be heard in expanding the policies in the future.
Yeah, that's a good point. The access, right? So I think I already had a question here written down about, do you think the U.S. needs to pass ranked joint voting before a third party can win, or can you get a third party in there to help pass the law first? The chicken and the egg question. I think.
Okay, yeah. So that's actually really interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that, but. My initial reaction is to say third-party candidates already win. They may not be as mass, obviously, because we do have a duopoly, but third candidates do win in local races and in federal and beyond. Justin Amash, he's a success story. He's on the Libertarian Party. He's like the single one out there on that level, but he's doing a lot of work. He has a lot of support behind him, but there's a lot of other candidates doing that and winning right now. And given all of the barriers that we just talked about, I think it's actually incredible that they are having wins, which ranked choice voting would certainly make a huge difference in accessibility, nonpartisan primaries too. I think those two, again, are the powerhouse of change. Absolutely. It would certainly make it easier and get more independents or third-party candidates elected, but I don't think it has to come first. The biggest hurdle to having third-party candidates, alternative party candidates, I'm actually trying to get in the habit of saying alternative party because we want more than 3. 2 is like the worst nightmare, right? That's the founding fathers said it. It's written down. It's in lots of places in history. 2 is a bad deal. But multi-parties would be phenomenal. But the biggest hurdle really is that people think a third-party candidate cannot be successful. That is what we've been conditioned to believe. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your vote. It's a lot of fear-mongering used. Oh, if you do that, then you're going to end up with this terrible candidate that you absolutely don't want. So you have to vote for our guy. That's the only way. Yeah. I hate the fear-mongering. It's awful. We shouldn't be controlling people with fear. We should be empowering them to make well-educated, informed decisions. So helping fight against media blackouts, the fear-mongering, the media efforts of only showing one side or another. We really just need to let people know that other party candidates absolutely can and will continue to win. And speaking as myself, not necessarily Forward Party, but as Blair Walshingham, I would absolutely encourage more people to register as independent. And we have seen a mass movement in this area as more people actually identify as independent right now than in previous cycles, basically ever. So people are taking a stand, and they know they don't want to give their vote away. They want to stand with their morals and make their reps truly work for them outside of the duopoly.
Yeah, that's that seems to be the problem, right? Is getting access to those ballots, and how many parties can we have? What's different about the Forward Party, I guess, is where my mind was going. What's different about the Forward Party specifically from the Libertarian Party, specifically from the Green Party? I know you want to make it accessible to all of them at once, right? But they have still not been able to make success, to get people in Congress or people in the make the executive class. So, how is it different than those two specifically?
Yeah, so I mentioned some of this a little bit before, but I think it's actually really simple. Is we have something some of the other parties haven't had. We have a few somethings. For one, we have a lot of name recognition. We have a high level. We have Andrew and several other high level people in our organization who have the capability to do mass outreach. And to be heard and to get on a lot of these media networks that somebody with less name recognition could get.
Yeah.
We also have community leaders that are all over the country. Again, we have thousands of volunteers previously, well, more than that, currently, from the previous election cycle have rolled in, and then we're continuously rolling in new people, which just lets me know we're in the right direction. So as I mentioned before, we have thousands of people in multiple states. We understand that people will be disenfranchised from voting in primaries, and that's a big difference. There's no other party that has ever done a startup that says, hey, you don't have to register to be us. That's ultimately a really big difference right there. And the fact that we are laser focused on the democracy reforms instead of a divisive issue. That's where a lot of third parties come out, is they have this one issue that is more extreme than not, that only has a smaller group of people and they can't really build that coalition. Now, that being said too, there are those barriers. Like, even if you get party recognition in one cycle, you have to maintain that recognition. You don't just all of a sudden, we got party status, now we get to keep it. No, you have to renew it. Every cycle, you have to do a lot of activity. So you need a powerful grassroots organization across the country to be able to actually make those goals, which we happen to have. And if someone is interested, if you're interested in helping with that, we have a volunteer portal. It's volunteer.forwardparty.com. Sorry, Toby, I'm gonna plug that real quick.
Go ahead.
So if you're interested in joining this movement, please do sign up, and wherever you do, put your state. It's incredibly important so we know where you are. We can plug you into the people in your area working to champion these policies and elect these amazing officials. So yeah, if you want to be a part of moving this country forward instead of keeping the mudslinging tire spinning, like let's do this. Come over to Forward Party. Again, you can keep your party registration for now. And we can really make the changes that we agree on.
And that's something that you specifically kind of have tried to lead the charge for, right? With volunteers across the nation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I am the volunteer coordinator and the deputy political director. I wear two hats because I like to work a lot. So,
yeah, what are you hearing? When you have Zoom calls, I think, with across the nation and things like that. So what are you hearing from these people?
Yeah, so these are actually incredibly important. It's kind of just like campaigning. You can say it's about raising money, you can say it's about getting on this certain network, but the point of raising that money and getting on that network is to talk to people. It's so that they hear you, and so that you can hear them. The hardest job is to listen. So having these Zoom calls, I think, is incredibly valuable, and you get a lot of people who have been disenfranchised. They, if you look at the numbers of incumbents, right, it's like 80-some% of people already in office stay in office, even if their rating is terrible. Like 20%, we think our elected official sucks, but we're gonna keep voting for him, right? It's this like kind of crazy cycle, and a lot of people are sick of it. And ultimately, I think that's what has led to this increased division, is the hyper-engaged people keep voting the same way, while the people who are sick of that behavior and nastiness back away from politics. And they don't know how to bring about these changes. So we hold lots of Zoom meetings. I held 6 over the last 2 weeks where we had volunteers come. We talked about how to get organized, how to help forward party, how to do outreach in your community, things like that, how we can support you in those efforts. And you hear a lot of the same things, is almost like what you and I said, Toby, is like, maybe I heard Andrew on Joe Rogan and I hated UBI, but then I did this research and I met all these amazing people along the way. And I've met people in my community who I know have fallen through the cracks. And our rep doesn't make those changes. They've been elected for 20 years, 30 years, and it's the same problems. The economy hasn't gotten better. Our kids are not getting a better education. Suicide rates are at an all-time high across the country. Our farmers are in dire need in many cases. It's not a good picture. It is a dark outlook for America, and they don't like it. And a lot of them have said, I haven't gotten engaged in politics before, but I will now. Like, enough is enough, and I believe in this movement, and I know that we can make it happen, so I'm here to roll up my sleeves and do the work.
Yeah, and I think what probably helps immediately is the not left, not right, but forward. I do love that tagline there. And I think that probably gets people thinking, yeah, you're right. I know a lot of people that have given up for voting, and it's never going to work. It doesn't matter. That guy's going to win anyway, or that that person's going to win anyway. That they keep saying that every election cycle. I'm starting to hear a lot of more people say that.
I hear that often, and we kind of touched on this too, is asking about like running candidates in the future. There's a few people who are really focused on the next presidential election, right? Talking 2024. What I would really encourage people to do here is live in the moment. Worry about this next election cycle. Start getting engaged in your local community, and don't devalue how important down ballot races can be. The president can't do anything, honestly, alone. We have the Senate, we have the House, but the changes a lot of the time that you want to see are at your locality. That's your school board, that's your city commissioners, that's your local reps who are there, right there, and they're actually more accessible to you. So I would say get engaged now, work for the candidates that you think are going to be amazing regardless of what party they're with. Choose the person, not the party, and show up now. I think that'll make the ultimate difference. And again, if you are hyper-focused on 2024, why wait until 5 minutes before the presidential election? Start doing work and outreach now. Put the pressure on your electives to hear you. And respect that. You have a say in who actually is elected. You really, truly do. But we have to get out there. Talk to your friends, talk to your families, talk to people who haven't been engaged. And I love I have one of our old signs back here, not left, not right, forward. I feel very strongly in that, especially since I was a registered independent previously. And I currently don't feel like the left or the right really reflects my true values at this point. But there's another thing under that sign, Toby, I don't know if you can see it. It's actually a $5 bill. And it says resist big money. That was one of my first donations that I ever got. And it's incredibly important in this area too, is making small donations to your candidates is incredibly powerful. One of the policies we do also have on our platform is democracy dollars. And I've heard them called voter vouchers. I've heard it called a variety of things, but essentially it is, you can spend money in the election, even if you don't have the cash and collateral yourself. That the government is saying, hey, we're going to reflect this amount of money and you can pick your candidate to give it to, right? Something like that would really help fight the corruption that we currently see with our officials, with lobbyists coming in. And if you ever listen to some of our elected officials talk about being elected, right? They have lobbyists knocking on their door outside their office, constantly saying, how big of a check do I need to write you to vote this way or that way? It's incredibly hard, right? So to help your officials and help people going forward, small donations can really make a big difference. So I just wanted to throw that out there too.
To those democracy dollars, we've learned about star manning on an episode with Angel a couple episodes ago, and then the reaction from the Republicans on that would be, well, where does that money come from, right? So I'm straw manning that. This is basically, right?
Yeah. No, I love this argument. And like I said, I felt the same way also. But when you look at the breakdown, look at the U.S. economy, which is $24-ish trillion. Look about the money that they throw around. Look at the committees, even in the House alone, and the budgets they have with no accountability. There is a lack of accountability that we really need to come to terms with. But obviously, poverty at this point in time in America is a policy choice. So funding democracy dollars, we actually have some places in America that already do this. I know there's some places out west, some places up north, and more people getting on board with that as we go. And it has made a difference already in their turnout cycles. More people have skin in the game that way. So if you're going to say, we have the budget to pay our elected officials all this money while they get, millions of dollars while they're in there, insider trading, which that has been all over the news for years, right? It's very open and obvious. So while they're getting rich and spending all this money, the people are actually asking for different policies that aren't being funded. We ultimately have the finances in place to do any of these programs and then some. And ultimately, there's a lot of ways that we can save money on the budget and that we can cancel out a lot of these ineffective programs that aren't actually helping people. I don't want to knock TANF at all. If you've never heard of that, it is a temporary monetary cash transaction to people. There's also a housing program for people in need. But when you actually go in and look at the data on that, it's like 70 some of applicants who actually qualify never even get the money. The money is sitting or it gets shuffled other places, things like that. We could really do a better job and save funds, reduce bureaucracy, reduce the red tape, all the nonsense, and just make this country more functional. And ultimately, that's what Forward Party wants to do. We want a more modern, 21st century functioning government that actually listens to the people.
Instead of playing a shell game with money that's appropriated for certain things like that, and just give them the money to vote who they want for. Yeah, right. That makes sense. Okay. So what is what's the necessary call to action for the Forward Party? And, is anybody going to run in 2022 or 2024 or anything, that you can tell us?
Yeah.
The midterms are coming up. I mean, you probably have to know about some people already, but you don't have to give it up necessarily.
Toby, as much as I would love to give you like the news breaking, really exciting story here saying, hey, I have this candidate for president or whatever I'm going to tell you about, I unfortunately don't have that information for you today. But a lot of people are obviously excited. I would say this, again, I would really encourage people to start meeting their reps right now. Even interview their independent candidates and get out in their community and start engaging. We're definitely certainly going to have candidates running in the 2022 cycle and endorsing people elected, other parties, new candidates, all over the spectrum for 2022. We absolutely will have candidates. And again, I'm very excited about that. I can't tell you necessarily who just yet because there is strategy, unfortunately, in politics. But yeah, get involved now. Don't wait until 2024. Again, show up not just for the presidentials, but the midterms this cycle. Show up for your down ballot candidates and work for these changes. The call to action is honestly advocacy and outreach. If you can take the time to talk to people, you're actually going to find some common ground. And I would encourage you to build upon that and definitely go to forwardparty.com. You can check out everything on there. We have some of our team on the page, our policies, our foundation, the 6 pillars of why Forward Party. And you can read all about it. There is an FAQ page. If you're just like really concerned about a particular issue, it's probably there and you can find out about it. And if you're just fed up, if you can ask yourself, is this working for you? Are you benefiting from our current government? If the answer is no, we welcome you here at Forward Party. go to volunteer.forwardparty.com, sign up, get in touch. We will do outreach to you. It's very simple. We'll get you plugged in and support you along this journey. And it's actually very exciting. And we like to have fun at Forward Party. Politics is too messy and dirty sometimes and nasty, and that's why a lot of people leave it. So we can have some lightheartedness. We have fun events, especially around like ranked choice voting and nonpartisan primaries. And this is actually pretty funny, Toby, is I recently tried taking a ballot and putting 2 flavors of ice cream. It's vanilla and it's chocolate. And I say, hey, would you mind rating which one of these is your favorite ice cream in the world? And they're like, well, it's cookie dough, or it's pralines and cream, or it's strawberry cheesecake. I'm like, oh, well, you can't pick one of those in this system. But I have this other ballot over here, which is nonpartisan, and it's ranked. So if you want to look at it, and they're like, oh, yeah, I want the ballot with the actual choices, right? And they're so we do a lot of like fun outreach. You can host pizza parties the same way, rank your favorite pizzas. And I actually challenge people to do stuff like that. So we like to have fun over here and make it more bearable. So yeah, come to a Forward Party meeting. We have a call usually monthly where we go over updates and let you know. But like I've already said, we're active in every state. We can get you plugged in. Just let us know, raise your hand, sign up, volunteer.forwardparty.com.
So you are active in every state already? Every
state and the territories also, actually. Proudly.
Fantastic.
DC is like standing strong. I'm incredibly proud of our DC group, actually.
Really?
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing to be on this side. And again, I've just met the most incredible people over this journey, Andrew Yang included. People who care deeply and want things to be better for everybody.
Yeah, and so speaking of Andrew Yang, probably a lot of buddies' questions are, is he going to run for the Forward Party in 2024? I would think probably not, right? He's trying to run the party. I would think so.
I would say that is ultimately going to be a question that Andrew has to answer. I would never discourage anybody from running for office if they truly feel called to do so and they think that they're going to make a good representative. Obviously, you have to look at the data and everything in your area to decide if that's the right choice for you. But again, I think that, and Andrew has said this, like, let's get through this cycle before we even talk about 2024. He did have a podcast episode the other day where he talks about his predictions for that cycle. So if you're interested in that, that is Forward with Andrew Yang on YouTube. It's also on other social media networks, Spotify, all that good stuff. So you can hear him tell you about his predictions specifically, but that's not our immediate concern. Our immediate concern is growing this movement and getting the electoral reforms in place so that if there is an amazing candidate for 2024, whether it's Andrew or somebody else, that they can be more successful. So ultimately, that's the path that we're on.
Yeah, he even predicted, I think outright on the show, that there would be a major Forward Party candidate for 2024 announced in 2022, but I don't think it's probably him. Yeah.
He's predicted a third party candidate, not necessarily a Forward Party candidate, that he thinks will announce somewhat soonish before the midterms in November.
That's right. Thanks for correcting that. So but it was a major third party candidate, right?
Yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah.
We had Jill Stein previously for the Green Party. She was fairly successful. She had over 1 million votes her last run. The Libertarians have had candidates up for, and there's honestly candidates you never hear about. There's like 250 small parties in America that are registered. Never heard of them. I actually think this is super interesting. My grandmother, she's 87. She is definitely on the right of the spectrum. She's never heard of another party, does not know that any other parties exist. Not the Green Party, never heard of them. She's like, the Green what? Like, like nothing. And I was like, you've really never heard of the Green Party? She was like, no. So again, that's where the media blackouts and those barriers to entry really come into play. But you can help people. You really can. If you get engaged now and start doing the work and know that they can and are elected, get behind them. If you think they're the right choice, do it. Stop letting people have your vote. Like, genuinely, make them earn it. I'm probably strong-willed here, but I think morals and you have to stand for something, right? You have to. Otherwise, what are we doing in this election? We really need to take a stand and say, this is the right person, that's who I'm going to vote for.
Yeah, it's so important. It's like Jordan Peterson says, well, how do you save the world Well, you have to talk to one person at a time, basically, right? So if every single individual did vote for the person that they really, really liked, that would change everything like that almost.
It would. It would make a huge difference if people truly reflected. And I think people, again, just get really scared here, especially from the left side of the spectrum. Well, I'd say actually probably the right too, is they're like, no, that person is pure evil. And if I don't vote for this candidate, even though they're not my favorite, I'm going to end up with the evil guy, right? That's what I hear from everybody. It's usually not their preferred candidate. And I don't want to say anything negative about anybody in particular, but there was a volunteer who actually traveled the country and did like a settle for so-and-so campaign. And that was their argument, was like, please settle for this candidate, even though I know you probably don't like him because this other person is evil. And literally, that was how they got through to people. What we really should be doing is saying, vote your true feelings, and then we won't be put in this position every cycle of picking a lesser of two unfavored candidates. Like I said, even here in our U.S. House cycle, if we had a ranked choice voting system or a nonpartisan primary, we probably wouldn't have our rep. She came into the fold and won with less than 21% of the vote. That is not reflective democracy, okay?
No.
So yeah, you might have to do a little bit of work. You might have to have some awkward conversations, but just be gracious, be genuine, talk about what you care about. Don't get hyper-focused on these extreme issues, which are important. But what's really important is making sure that your kids have educations, that there's job opportunities in your area so that people can keep their families together, keep their bills paid, and keep improving this country and making it a better place, genuinely.
Yeah, if you can at least share this episode with one friend who is not inside our bubble in the middle here, then they'll know, oh, there's another party, there's another candidate possibly in these races. Yeah.
Yeah, and that there is something to be said about compound growth. You reach out to one, you get through to one person, they get through to one person, all of a sudden you've multiplied yourself by 3. It has an incredible effect. So I would say advocacy and outreach is a really simple thing that you can do to help this movement and help America actually move forward.
Well said. And so the website is forwardparty.com. And how else can everybody reach you? Go through those again, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So the main website is forwardparty.com. If you want to read about more in details, our policy platforms, the whys, the ins and outs, you can go there. Again, we have a very active Twitter presence. We have a YouTube. You can just type in Forward Party. You can listen to the podcast. Andrew records several a week, and that's Forward with Andrew Yang. You can find that on YouTube, and those are incredible. So you're not just hearing somebody from Forward Party, you're hearing people from all over the country, from all over the political spectrum, talk about these issues that we all seem to care about. So I would say that's a great place to go. I personally would encourage you to go to volunteer.forwardparty.com. And if you take what I said about the small money donations truly to heart, please go donate. Even $1 can make a really big difference, especially when we're coming up to these amazing candidates and they want to know, like, how big is our network? That's a really easy way we can show them. It helps us with party recognition. So even $1 could be incredibly meaningful. $5 if you want to be fancy. Even more, go all out. We're happy to accept it. Helping candidates get the exposure they need can be costly. It's an ugly side of politics, and it's a broken side of politics. But we have to get these reforms in place so that we can make those changes. So please help us get there. So yeah, forwardparty.com and volunteer.forwardparty.com.
Yeah, if you have the money, don't sign up for your 13th streaming service. Throw $1 or $5 or even 10 at the, a party of your choice, a candidate of your choice. Are there any events coming up to watch for, or special meetings or anything for the Forward Party?
Yeah, absolutely, Toby. Another great question. So if you do log into the volunteer portal, we have an event section, which is essentially a calendar. You can find all the upcoming events, whether it's local to you or if it's centered around a ballot measure, or our monthly calls. Those are all listed there. And we do try to promote those events on social media also. But that is really the best way to stay connected, is to be in our volunteer portal. So if you're curious, you can also reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to people and send some information. That's Blair, Blair, at forwardparty.com. If you have questions specific to volunteering, you can also email volunteer@forwardparty.com, and we'll get back to you as quick as we can. And I say that with a great smile on my face because we get so many people reaching out to us that it's almost hard to keep up with. And that couldn't make me happier to know that so many people across the country really believe in this movement.
Fantastic. Well, we'll go ahead and end it there. Blair Walsingham from the 40 Party, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Toby. It was a very nice conversation to have.
Okay, we appreciate it. We'll see everyone next time. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the UnityNow podcast. We'll be back with another conversation that highlights the political middle ground to unite Americans and end the ideological war. In the meantime, we'd love to hear from you. Please comment below and hit that subscribe button.